Sometimes when I'm pumping a lot, if I pumped a lot over the course of a day or just like randomly, I will get like almost like a burning or like a tingling feeling on my nipples, but I just assume, like, I have really sensitive skin. I just assume, and like they're kind of red, and I just assume that it's that. I've tried like every flange size under the sun. I was fitted at a 15, and that's mostly what I've been using, but I do get like a decent amount of areola that like gets pulled in with that. So I ordered a 13.
It's Lo. I'm so glad to be recording again. Welcome to my podcast, Lo's Lactation Lab. It has been nearly a year since I put out an episode, but I am back and ready to explore the highs and lows of feeding our babies in such a way that helps you, the listener, feel as if you can make the right choices for your baby and for your body, given your unique situation. There is no better way to come back to the podcast than with a recording of a telehealth consultation in which I help Catherine explore the underlying root causes of what was making breastfeeding her baby so challenging. Catherine had a 7-week-old. She had seen several other lactation consultants and was trying to figure out why was her baby not transferring very much milk, and what were the causes of her low milk supply even when pumping. You will hear that we just dive right in to the consultation. She had a crying baby right when we got started, and so I just hit record and she started latching her baby. That's sometimes what it's like when we have a telehealth consultation and we're dealing with itty-bitty babies who just need to get going on their feeding right away. So enjoy this episode and all the ones that are to come as we tackle the challenges and the joys of feeding our babies. So let's go ahead and you can just latch her how you normally would.
Okay. Hold on. Well, okay. Can you see?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
And this is the side that feels better.
This side, I feel like pumps more readily when I pump.
Mm-hmm.
Never had as much like nipple damage when she was originally using the nipple shield.
Mm-hmm.
And I currently think I have a clogged duct on the other side. So yeah, this was just my go-to.
Mm-hmm.
But for what it's worth, I just revisited our lactation consultant at Cooley, that's where I delivered yesterday. And we did a weighted feed, and she just doesn't transfer milk, basically. It seems like I think that she did this for, I don't know, it always doesn't feel that long when I'm talking with someone, you know what I mean? I don't feel like she did it for more than 10 minutes, but then she said she got, my gosh, I've done this so many times that I can't remember. I think she said it was like a third of an ounce. I think that's what she said, a third of an ounce.
0.3 ounces?
No, I don't know. Like a third of an ounce. So like 0.33, right?
Yeah, that's what I just said. 0.3.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Did she word it like a third of an ounce, or that's how your brain translated it?
She told me milliliters, and then
got it.
I obviously didn't know, so I think she then translated that to me, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. I was like, that's a weird way to like say what the transfer was. Okay, now I get it. Okay.
But like what she had commented on, which I don't know if you can see, first of all, she typically when she lashes, like she feels very like chompy. But we had done something that made it better. And I think it was really just pulling her chin down, which again, like I never know how I would be doing that when I'm holding her and holding my breast and like, you know what I mean? But to try to get her latch deeper, although it looks like now I can actually see it because I have like a camera in front of me, but it looks like I think her lips look fine. I don't know. Well, first of all, she's asleep right now. She always like kind of falls asleep really quickly. she suggested that she has, like, no ties or anything, but oral dysfunction, essentially, she doesn't utilize like, the latch is able to be fine, and she said the tongue movement is fine, but, like, the suck is not, basically. I don't know. I think that was there was so much info there, like, I've gotten so much information.
Was she able to name what the cause, like, there's always a oral dysfunction is a symptom, right? So is she able to say what she thinks the cause of the oral dysfunction is? Okay.
So here's what I walked away from that, um I know, honey, from that meeting with, that there was, like, the dual situation. I know, and so she gets aggravated, I think, honestly, because there's not a lot of milk coming out.
Now, if you were to compress,
Sometimes I can never tell. Oh, that's the other thing is I don't know if you can tell, but she does a lot of, like, sucking without swallowing.
right, I was trying to watch. We may need to be silent for a second, so I can listen as well. That was a swallow. That was a swallow. That was a swallow.
And so that's the thing is, like, she'll swallow like that, but then this woman said, she was like, I weighed her because I just thought, well, maybe she's taking really big gulps or something. Not a ton of swallows, but bigger gulps. But then the weighted feeds never show anything other than, like, a really small amount. So I walked out of that meeting with a couple of things. She wants me to pump more, which I guess to, like, get up my supply, which just feels daunting in and of itself, the way I pump 8 times a day, and I've never been able to raise my supply from the average of, like, 1 to 1.5 per pump, and I've been doing this for however many weeks at this point. And so that was on my end, and then on her end, she wanted me to do some, like, oral exercises with her where I, like, stuck my finger and, like, touched her, like, palate, and then did the same thing sort of with the pacifier. I can't remember, honestly, what the goal of was the pacifier was, but just training her to, like, suck, I guess. And then this was the weird part that I was so excited that I was talking to you today because I was like, I don't understand this part, but her major takeaway was that we should be feeding Annie, like, with when we feed, because we only feed her bottles at this point. We don't do this because if she's not getting anything, what's the point? She I know, and you can't see her, like, legs, but she, like, kicks around like she's, like, unsettled.
Mhm.
Uh, so we only feed her bottles, and so we feed her 3 ounces every, I mean, basically on demand, but, like, during the day, it's usually, like, 2 to 3 hours unless she's been sleeping, and it's a little bit longer, and during the night, it's, like, if she wakes up, we feed her, but otherwise, like, we'll cap her out at, like, 5 to 6 hours because that's just what our pediatrician told us to do. Um, but so that's what she takes in, and I know. Tell me when you want me to stop her.
No.
Um, and that was the other thing is the lactation consultant yesterday asked, like, when does she, like, show you that she's had enough? Like, how does she, like, pop off? What does she do? But she's literally never done that. She doesn't, like, pop off the breast unless she's really angry. She just kinda stays on it. But, anyway, so the major takeaway she had was she I know. This is where I, like, always presume that she's just not getting milk.
Is there a place in your breast that you feel the most amount of milk? Like a quadrant. Like if you are pumping and you compress, is there a place where like, oh, you see a little bit more?
It varies. It's rarely on the inside here. It's usually more on the outside. Unless I sometimes sometimes I do get clogs here for some reason. I don't know if my understanding is that that's not related to milk, but I don't know. Okay. Okay. I know. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you compress on the outside, will
Does
she? And then
Let me see.
yeah, if she's
Okay.
upset after you try to compress a little bit on the outside, you can.
Let me see. Okay. Yeah, it just doesn't seem like.
Yeah. Do you want to get her off to dad so she can have a bottle? Okay.
So just to kind of briefly wrap up what I was saying about
That
the
appointment.
visit.
Yeah.
So her major thing that answers your question about like what she said the cause of the oral dysfunction was that she feels as though Annie's almost 7 weeks. She feels as though she should be taking in 4 ounces at a feed instead of the 3 that we give her, and that we should go up a nipple size in the bottle because she watched me feed her from the bottle, and she said like she was, I forget if she was getting sleepy when she was feeding from the bottle, or oh no, I'm sorry, she was not taking a lot in at once, but we had always fed her that way purposefully because that's what I had thought like paced feeding was all about in terms of like mimicking the breast. Now, granted, obviously I wasn't breastfeeding or I haven't been breastfeeding, so I don't know what I've been doing that for, but she's just like super refluxy all the time, so we just thought that that was best. But so her take was that to get her the milk faster and to not tire her out so much and to give her more food was going to like make her stronger so that she could. I'm not sure. Like that's where then I started to get confused because then I was just like I don't really know how that's related. It feels like you're actually teaching her like to work less hard with the faster nipple flow. So we did it as soon as we got home from the appointment, and then I did it all day today. My husband and I, because my husband feeds her overnight, and by middle of the day today, like she had spit up so much over the course of like multiple tablespoons over like 4 to 5 times after her feed that I was like, I'm just done with this because this just feels like too much. But it is tricky because after we feed her 3 ounces, she seems like she's just a fussy, colicky baby, I think. And so she doesn't seem content. Like she seems like she's either still hungry or just angry. I'm not sure, but she doesn't seem super content, and so she took the 4 ounces happily. Did she seem more content after the 4? Maybe. I guess, I don't know, I think I would have to do it for longer, but she was spitting up so much more that I was just like with 3, we had gotten to a point where she did not typically spit up a large amount after the feed. And I don't know if it's because of the pacing, the faster pacing or the more liquid, but she was just generally, like, lots of spit up today, very, like, just seemed uncomfortable, like, a lot more gassy than normal, and just with the fact that I couldn't understand why that guidance would make any sense for improving her, like, function of her mouth, I just was like, "We'll just not do that for now."
Yeah.
I mean, I did ask the pediatrician because I said, because I never wanna be, like, starving her. I'm like, "Of course, if someone thinks that she should take 4 ounces at this point, then great. I'll happily give her that," but I just the spitting up and, like, I don't know. She's been small. Like her weight has been the whole sort of thing that started all of this. So there is like a real fixation that's been happening on her weight, which is not frustrating because obviously like you that's how they correlate health at this point, I feel like with babies, but
Our whole
um
lives really, right? Like they focus so much on, especially as women. Yeah.
right, right. So
Yeah.
so yeah, so that's the summary of what I've been dealing with over the last like 36 hours, which has just sort of added an extra layer of like confusion. I mean, it was nice to hear that she didn't think she had ties because at this point now, two IBCLCs have said that they don't think has ties. So I'm assuming that must be true. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned in your intake form that you feel like she has a lot of symptoms of ties. So it sounds like you've done a little bit of research about that. Tell me some of the things that have made you wonder and seek out advice from professionals about. I've heard a few. Red flags are going off in my mind, even though other people have said no, that can't be. But even with the oral dysfunction thing, there's always a reason for oral dysfunction. So saying that there's oral dysfunction, it's kind of like, yeah, of course there's oral dysfunction. She can't feed at the breast. She can't transfer milk. Like she's struggling to gain weight. And that's literally a baby's only job. So, like, yes, there's oral dysfunction, but why? And if somebody can't say why, then I'm like, yeah, we need to. And I'm hearing that she's saying, yeah, her tongue needs to improve, but what is making it so that that can't happen?
And
Um,
so that's where I get confused because if it seems like she can latch, which it does at this point, and if it seems like she can, granted, she's a little chompy, but she also hasn't had a lot of practice at this point, right? Like she had the first 2 weeks where she was actually breastfeeding, she was using the nipple shield. Um, and so she's a little chompy, but like when I adjust her, it doesn't necessarily feel like the sucking that people say it should feel like. It does feel a little bit more like this, and I notice like my nipple's a little flat when it comes out, but she can latch and she's on there and we can hear swallows, right? So I always go back to like, is it not just, I get that it's all sort of cyclical, but is it not just more related to my milk supply? Like, that's what I assume. If she doesn't have ties, which to answer your question, like all of the things that I was thinking of with the ties, I mean, it's all the stuff that you had said, right? It's like the low milk transfer. It's like the low output that I have because of that. If it's because of that, it's the like the chompiness at the breast, the flattening of the nipple, the she doesn't like open her mouth really wide, and, what was the other thing? Oh, just in general, like, I had read that it was, like, reflux, fussiness, that sort of thing and now I mean, that can be just because, or it can be attributed to, um, ties, I thought I had
mhm,
read.
mhm,
Um, but there's a lot going on. I mean, we feed her formula, so I don't know if there is a level of it just doesn't sit well with her stomach. Like I've never been able to produce enough to give her all breast milk for a day to know.
right. Yeah.
Um, so that's tricky. And yeah, but I fundamentally, if she doesn't have ties and if like her latch is okay and she's sucking and swallowing and all of that, I fall back on it has to be something with what's going on with me, just because even when I pump, like, I don't think that I have, like, a normal output or, like, pattern of pumping. Like,
Mhm,
I don't have a letdown, I
mm,
don't think. It's just, like, kind of drops. Sometimes I'll get, like, a stream or, like, a spray. It's hit or miss. Some pumps I get it, some pumps I don't. Sometimes it comes on after compression. Sometimes it just happens on its own. Um, I only I only pump in I think it's the stimulation mode,
mhm.
faster mode. because that's what I found like gets me more, or like really anything. And I do it at like the highest suction that my pump has.
Mhm. Are you in any pain when you're pumping?
No,
Okay.
no. I mean, sometimes like afterwards, I don't know. It's intermittent, but sometimes when I'm pumping a lot, if I pumped a lot over the course of a day, or just like randomly, I will get like almost like a burning or like a tingling feeling on my nipples, but I just assume like I have really sensitive skin. I just assume and like they're kind of red. And I just assume that it's that. I've tried like every flange size under the sun. I was fitted at a 15 and that's mostly what I've been using, but I do get like a decent amount of areola that like gets pulled in with that. So I ordered a 13. I don't know, I showed that yesterday as well, the 13 versus the 15 because I had just gotten the 13 in. And the 13 she said looked better, she thought, which I agree, it looks closer to like just nipple being in the tunnel. Um, but it seemed like I wasn't getting a lot of output with the 13, although then like last night it was the reverse and the 13 was getting me more in than the 15. Like I don't know. It's just
Mhm.
is all so like there's no rhyme or reason to it, which is the hardest part for me cuz I'm like if I just knew what I could do to improve the situation then I would just do it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but that's the general pumping.
Okay, so there's a couple of things you're trying to sparse out here, like what's going on with milk supply, because even if baby can't transfer milk efficiently, you're pumping sufficiently to be able to have more supply. I'm interested in this idea of the 15 between the 15 and the 13, but I want to get a little bit more information. You said you pump about 8 times per day and you're getting about 1 to 1.5 ounces per pump. Is that right?
Yeah, sometimes it's less than 1, sometimes it's 2. It's never really more than that. I mean, part of me too, though, this is so sorry, this is like sidetracking, but if I am getting 2 ounces, let's say, or I'm sorry, one ounce, 1.5 ounces, shouldn't she at least be able to transfer that? Like, that's where I get confused about is it a her thing then?
Not necessarily, right? Like
Okay.
we expect babies with good oral motor function to be able to transfer better than a pump.
Right, that's what I read. So
Right,
that's why I was like,
right,
okay, if I'm at least getting,
right.
does he get more? But
That's why I do think this is a dual issue, which was your instinct, right? That it's both something going on with her and something going on with your supply. And what it takes is kind of working on one, like creating building blocks to, like, okay, let's figure out supply, let's figure out the oral dysfunction, and let's try to build one upon the other. Now you expressed kind of earlier, you kind of said offhanded, based on going back to work, that is it even worth putting a lot of effort in? And I do think that we can at least get to the bottom of root causes. And then once we know root causes, it is possible to improve the situation. I've seen that happen. It's not too late. I've seen it happen many times, but sometimes it takes more work than what it feels worth it to you to do. And I can't answer that for you. Nobody can, it has to be you that says, okay, based on what we've discovered, do I want to keep going or is it time for me to make a different decision? And I am so happy to like help you along the way to figure out, the next right step at any given point. But I do think we need to figure out this oral dysfunction thing and the milk supply thing. So I'm going to stick with the pumping for just a second. How long does your typical pumping session last?
I usually so I have 2 things going on. I will use my Spectra, my wall pump when my husband's not working, basically, and so when I do that, I do a single-sided pump because I find that when I do it double-sided, the suction is, like, so poor. no, I shouldn't say so poor, but it's notably less than if I just have one plugged in.
With the Spectra?
Yeah.
That should not be the case.
Okay. I was like Googling it, and the Spectra website, well, the Australia Spectra website, but the Spectra website said that like when you have both plugged in the port, the section is going to be like split, so you're going to get less than, you know what I'm saying? That's what their site said. I don't know, because I finally was like, this can't be right. Like, do I have to call that? It was a new machine, you know, but I feel like I get better section when I only have one plugged in. So I mean, I'd love to be able to do both at the same time. But I typically have been having one plugged in, and I'll do it for like 20 minutes. And then if I'm in the middle of like, because I don't get those like streams a lot, if I do have one, I'll keep going for a couple more minutes than that. And then I go to the other side, which is like, that's just super taxing because it's a super long pump session. And then my wearables that's what I use during the day, which I know aren't always as good. Weirdly, like sometimes I'll have better sessions with those or as good. Like they basically give me the same amount of milk. And those ones I just do for 30 minutes because it's like the auto shut off is 30 minutes. So that's kind of why I've done it that way.
And are you using 15 millimeter inserts?
With the wearables, I'm actually using 17 just because that's the smallest I came with them. And they're like silicone.
Is it the Zomi?
No, it's the Mom Cozy S9 something Pro, S9 Pro or something.
Okay, so I would love to see where it says that on the Australian Spectra website.
Yeah, do you want me to find it?
Yeah. I worked for Vital Milk, breast pump I still work for her on Mondays. Breast pump, an insurance covered breast pump distributor, and for like it's been like 6 years now, and I've never heard this before. And all of the evidence shows that double pumping produces more milk than single pumping. So I'm wondering if there's like something going on with your pump.
Yeah, that's what, because like everyone's like, yeah, like double stimulation is better, obviously.
And yeah, having to pump 40 plus minutes 8 times a day, that's like a lot. I could imagine that if you were using super high suction, and you are.
Well, that's my problem is because because I just use stimulation mode, I do it at the 5. So that's when I single pump, but that's the highest it lets you go for the stimulation mode for the Spectra. So then when I double pump, that I can't go any higher than that.
And are you noticing, like, do you notice an actual reduction in milk output?
Yeah, well, yes and no. I haven't double pumped in so long. So I double pumped yesterday, but I also was like, I wore Annie the day before, so I had like a bunch of what I think were like irritated ducts. So I assumed that was why I like did not produce a lot of milk yesterday at all. I actually was like kind of freaking out, but I think it's gotten back to normal. But so I couldn't tell, I guess, is
okay
the answer.
Now, there's a few things with pumping that I'm curious about. One is the fact that you do feel kind of a sensation afterwards, like, you know, you described it as like a burning or just like a discomfort. And I do think that that is telling us that something could be improved with pumping because you really, even for people who have sensitive nipples and digits and skin in general, ideally you would not be experiencing any lingering discomfort.
Yeah.
And so,
and I haven't tried the 13s for very long. Like literally, I got them in the mail yesterday. So,
and are they a hard flange or are they a silicone insert?
They are hard.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. The only difference about them is that they're still from like they're like the Maymom one. My 15 is a hard, just regular one. This one is still hard, but it's like, they're like
the crater.
I don't remember. No, it's the pano.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's larger because in my mind too, I was like, because I can't get my nipple anywhere close to the insert like of the tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I assume just because I have like a lot of breast tissue.
Mm-hmm.
So when I saw these ones, I was like, well, maybe if it's like opens up more, I can like get myself in there more, which I think is valid. Like I
Yeah.
think that has happened. So yeah.
That could make a big difference. We see that different, there's the crater, there's the pano, there's the traditional, there's the silicone inserts, and we do see that some people's bodies respond better to various shapes and configurations and materials than others. The sucky part about that is insurance only covers 2 total sets, and so then you have to be able to put the money into it to
Right.
try the various stuff,
Right.
unless you're working with an LC who has a bunch of parts for you to try. And even then, like I carry around a bunch of parts, but I don't have like every shape for every size. I need to. It's just, it's hard to get it all built up. So I'm interested in seeing what would happen doing the 13s,
Mm-hmm.
that pano shape for a little bit. I think your instincts, of trying to improve the situation have been good.
Yeah.
I do think going back to the double pumping just for a little bit to see, can you get the same amount of milk in half the time by
Right.
just going back to double pumping?
Yeah.
Also, if the wearables seem to produce just as much milk as the wall pump, for most people, that's not the case. But I do encounter people where it is, and sometimes it has to do with stress, because anytime you're feeling stressed, that inhibits the release of oxytocin, which is what allows for that release, that milk release to happen. So, a lot of times if people are super stressed while pumping, which is a vicious cycle because pumping becomes stressful when it's not going well, and then it goes back and forth, but people will feel milk in their breasts and it won't be coming out because they've got so much cortisol flowing that they can't have the release of oxytocin. Do you feel like you experience that at all?
Well, the only thing that would like make me think that is so for it is tough to because pump outputs can vary so much. It's tough to say definitively. Like then I was getting in my head and I would be like, well, the wearable got me this much, but how do I know? Like maybe on that pump my wall would have gotten me more. Do you know what I'm saying? Like so but regardless, for a while I was like the wearables, they're giving me just as much, whatever. So then I thought there's like a way to kind of hook up those as the collection cups to the Spectra.
Mhm.
So I was like, maybe it's the material, right? Like maybe it's the silicone. So I bought this adapter and tried that to see if my breast just responded better to the silicone material, but still having the pump suction. And that didn't really get me anything.
Mhm.
So, or not anything like noticeable or good. So I basically, yeah, I mean, maybe it's the idea of like with the wearables, I can feel a little bit more like I'm just somebody who really likes to be like productive, especially at
Mhm.
this time, right, in our lives where it's like everything is just so crazy
Mhm.
that at least with the wearables, I can like pop those on and be like, I'm putting the dishes away. And like that is really stress relieving to me. And then I'm also
Mhm.
watching what's happening. I know people say like don't watch the pump when you're doing it. I actually find with the wall pump at least the least amount of stress when I am watching it because I'll like do compressions or watch it and then like if I see a stream coming out then I'm like nice like this is
Mm.
like
Mhm.
better
Mhm.
versus if I don't look at it then
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
yeah
whatever is making you feel the least amount of stress is what you should do, which is why, do I think you should conduct a little experiment. Um, I think you should go like 3 days and do, choose what you want to do first, but 1 day of just the wearables and track your 24-hour total. Another day of like 3 days in a row, right? Because sometimes we need to let our body catch up to what we're doing. Another day with double pumping with uh the 13s and another day with single pumping with the 13s. So 3 sets of 3 days. So like go for like a week and a half. Now let's say you get to the second day of one and you're noticing really reduced output, then you can stop that experiment, right?
Yeah, because I was gonna ask, like,
Yeah.
I guess my fear is I'm like, okay, what if I did that with the wearables, for example, but it's really not good at emptying me, and then I'm like risking my supply.
Right. Yeah. So if you get to a point where you're like, this is scaring me, then just go back to what you normally do, right? But if you're noticing, it does seem like it's pretty similar, then collect more data, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So that's a step that we can take to see, is there anything that can be improved with just the pumping? The other thing I will say is, if you are using a 17 insert on the wearable, but you're measuring like the 13 feels really comfortable, then you probably want to get a 13 insert for the wearable, and you may see significant increase.
I will say the wearables, I don't know if it's because but that wouldn't really make sense. I was gonna say, I don't know if it's because it's less suction, but it's a different type of suction, or it feels different at least. That's my most comfortable, like, pumping experience. But they're the 17s, so I never know, like, why that would be the case.
It could be because it's lower suction. Like, it may be that you're pumping it up, and even though it's like fine, it may be that you want to back it down a little.
Okay.
So experiment with that too, right? Like, what is even just like closing your eyes and moving it down, not looking at the number, and like really trying to tune into your body to see what feels the best, because discomfort, again, inhibits the release of oxytocin.
Yep.
So if that's your most comfortable pump, you may see if you can get the right size. Those are going to be like, I don't know, $9 on Amazon. Or go on a mom group and say, does anybody have 13 millimeter inserts? Because people buy those kits that include.
Right. I bought a kit.
Okay.
And I don't think it went as small as 13. It definitely didn't, because this is the first time I've had 13s. But even with the 15, I put that in the wearable. But weirdly, the kit, I don't know, like, what the point of the kit is.
Yeah.
If they only give you one of each size. So, like, I only had one.
Oh, that's
15.
weird.
Right, yeah. But so I did test out both, just to see if, like, I would get, like, drastically different output on the side that had the 15. But again, like, there's just so many variables that, like, so I didn't get drastically different output. I got, the same or less than what I would normally think I would get. But I'm like, but that could just be like that breast that day wasn't.
Which is why it's better to do something a little more systematic, a little more consistent. And sometimes people think, okay, if I just go smaller, my supply will be better if I need a smaller size. But sometimes going smaller, if it's not small enough, can actually have the opposite effect.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, because it can kind of pinch the mammary glands as they're coming into the tunnel in just a different way.
Yeah.
Because if any areola is getting into the tunnel, it's going to it's like squeezing a hose, it's going to make it to where the milk can't get out.
The goal is to have, I mean, yesterday this woman saw the 13 and said she thought that looked better as well. But the goal is to have basically not any areola in the tunnel, right? For the most part.
So here's the deal. Flange sizing is part science, part art. So the goal is to find the size that produces the most amount of milk in the least amount of time with no discomfort.
Right.
Which really sucks, because it means trying multiple sizes. Now, we have found that for most people, when there is no areola coming into the tunnel and you use a little lubricant to allow the nipple to really slide in and out, That is the size that produces the most amount of milk in the least amount of time with the most amount of comfort. But when I do phalange sizings, if I measure you at a 14, I'm going to try you in a 12, a 13, a 14, a 15, a 16, and a 17. And I might even leave you with 3 sizes because you need to figure out. Sometimes we see it in that one session right away.
Mhm.
Other times, especially if your nipples are inflamed for any reason, what we see needs to happen is you might size at a 12, but if you've been using a 17, then we need to get you into a 16 and then into a 15 and then into a 14 slowly, because
Yeah.
we have to, the tissues are inflamed internally. And so we have to let your body adapt to the correct size.
I mean, I will say, like, when I line myself up, like, ready to palm, the 13 looks like my whole nipple is in the tunnel and, like, maybe a little bit of space, but not really. But then once I start pumping, I mean, it does, like, fill and, like, rub up against the side, but it's I, like, always I mean, like, my nipple always gets, like, far larger when I'm
Which
pumping
is why you probably need to go smaller
in the flange
in the
size.
flange size. Right.
Okay.
Because it's going to fill that space. It's going to
Yeah.
fill the space that's available.
Well, that makes sense because when I take my wearables off, my nipples are, like, bigger than when I'm doing the wall pumping, which I have a size smaller for.
Right. Right. And it can stay inflamed. Like the capillaries inside the areola and the nipple, they get damaged with lots of pumping and incorrect sizes. And so that's why sometimes, even if I measure somebody at a 13, like they can't go straight to a 13, or I might measure them at a 15, but once they get into the 15, now they're going to measure at a 13 because there's that inflammation is healing, but it's not going to heal overnight or in one pumping session.
You know what? It's really interesting because I think that the, like, tingling that I was talking about was happening most frequently, like, it wouldn't happen right away after, but it would be, like, an hour after I would pump, um, was happening most frequently, like, when I was using my wearables quite a so I do wonder if that's just the size is too big.
Yeah. Yeah. I would definitely see if you can I can send you a link to one that has doubles for all the sizes, if that's
Okay.
helpful.
Yeah, like, I thought, like, I don't know, I just picked, I don't know, some random
I
one.
know. There's so many to choose from.
I would assume there would have been 2, and
I
then when I
know.
went to
That's annoying. Yeah. Yeah. So I am interested in this. Now, the other thing I want to talk about when we talk about milk supply is I want to talk through your blood work that you had.
Yeah, I had blood work done because, well, 1, I was just, like, grasping at anything to try to figure out what was going on, and with the thyroid stuff, I had read, like, thyroid can be something that can affect milk supply, and I had, like, a questionable thyroid screen in my first trimester. It was, like, my TSH was a little high, and it ended up being, I think we checked it again later in the first trimester and then again in my second trimester, and it ended up being fine, but with, like, the wonkiness of it, I was just like, "We might as well check it." So I wanted that to be checked, and then I had a postpartum hemorrhage, like, immediately after birth, and so I wanted to check, like, my iron levels, I guess, just to make sure, because that was the other thing I had read could be affecting supply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what
Uh,
did you find out?
I mean, everything looked normal.
So tell me
I
what
actually
normal was on the labs.
So for my TSH, it's funny, it's actually lower than I've ever had. I've had thyroid tested, like, quite a few times. My mom's side has thyroid problems, so I've always just sort of advocated and asked for it every now and then, but it's lower than it had ever been. It was 1.66, which mine's not usually that low.
As you can hear, Catherine has a lot going on. She encountered so many difficulties and was trying really, really hard, both to increase her milk supply and to get her baby latching so that she could body feed more regularly. So come back next week and you are going to hear part 2, where I offer solutions to her difficulties. In this first part, I do a lot of listening, information gathering, making sure that I understand the full picture. Because as a clinical lactation consultant and IBCLC, I have to really understand the individual difficulties and try to uncover the root causes. And so offering solutions right away does not always lead to understanding what might be at the heart of the difficulty being experienced. So with that being said, come back next week and listen to part 2 of Catherine's story.